Daniel Ricciardo is about to be paid the biggest paycheck of his life, and it comes off the sidelines. Ricciardo might not have been in the best form these past couple of years, but he's about to make some serious bank. In this video, we'll be talking about Daniel Ricciardo's upcoming salary and his career moments so far. Let's get into it. First off, Daniel Ricciardo is set to earn $36 million. For the past 11 years, Daniel Ricciardo has been a permanent name on the Formula One roster. The upcoming year is going to be the first in over a decade where we probably won't see the Aussie race. It's ironic because this is also going to be his highest earning year in Formula One, and it's going to come while he watches on from the sidelines. The Australian has returned to Red Bull as a third driver, an understudy to Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. He might be reserved to sipping his own brand of champagne as he waits on the sidelines, but Daniel Ricciardo is going to earn $36 million this year. The largest portion of the money is going to come from McLaren, as they pay Ricciardo $22.2 million in severance pay because they terminated his contract a year early. The rest of his earnings will come from Red Bull as he returns to the team as their third driver. It has been a sad end to Ricciardo's career, with the move almost cementing that we've seen the best of Ricciardo at this point. At least the Australian is making some great money for himself. Moving on, we had to include his first win. There's something special about your first win. Daniel Ricciardo tasted victory for the first time 3 years into his Formula One career. Coincidentally, it's been almost a decade since the racing veteran got his first win on the board. Ricciardo, then only 24, got to experience victory for the first time at the Canadian Grand Prix while driving for Red Bull. He went up against some serious opposition at the time as well. He was up against a stacked Mercedes team of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Seems like luck was on Ricciardo's side that day, as Lewis Hamilton was forced to retire early due to a brakes issue. Not to take anything away from Ricciardo's win though, because he still had very stiff competition. Nico Rosberg was still in the race, starting alongside Hamilton as they took up the top spots. Ricciardo managed to make his way up to the second place. He overtook Rosberg in the final laps, and Felipe Massa and Perez crashed out in the second last lap. As the safety car came out, Ricciardo was able to easily cross the finish line. What had been written off as an easy win for the Mercedes drivers turned out to be a hard-fought win for Daniel Ricciardo. He even said that since he won the race in the final few laps and didn't have time to let it sink in. That's understandable for your first win, and that too over Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg no less. Coming up next, how could we not mention the shoey? They might have been competitors in Montreal, but seeing Lewis Hamilton and Daniel Ricciardo doing shoeys together has to be one of the best moments in the sport. Daniel Ricciardo has always been seen as one of the most charismatic people on the circuit. If his name pops up, you always think of his great sense of humor and, of course, the shoey. For those of you who don't know what a shoey is, Daniel Ricciardo is known for drinking champagne from his sweaty race boot after a podium finish. It might be a little disgusting, sure, but it's one heck of a celebration. He started doing the celebration at the German Grand Prix in 2016, and he's done it everywhere since. The best one, in our opinion, has to be the one he shared with Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton agreed to take part in the unhygienic celebration at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix 3 years ago. The Brit really took it into stride as well, chugging it two-handed. The shoey isn't specific to Daniel Ricciardo though, as Gerard Butler and Sir Patrick Stewart have also done it before. The most notable name to do shoeys has to be fellow Aussie Tai Tuivasa over in the UFC. Racing and fighting might not be too similar, but we can say Australian athletes love drinking out of shoes. Next up, let's talk about the Monaco win. Daniel Ricciardo has seen both sides of the sport at Monaco. All the way back in 2016, he lost out on a great win because of one botched pit stop. The Aussie looked likely to win the race ahead of Lewis Hamilton when his pit crew decided he needed a tire swap too late. Since they made the decision while the mechanics were already out, the right tires arrived way too late, losing precious time and losing first place to Hamilton. That loss is what made the win 2 years later so satisfying to watch. That botched pit stop haunted Ricciardo till he stepped onto the Monaco track again. In 2018, the Australian came into the race for Red Bull and was leading for 28 laps before tragedy almost struck again. He felt his car losing engine power, and Christian Horner confirmed that the issue couldn't be fixed. It looked like the Australian's chances of finishing with a top spot victory were next to zero, but Daniel Ricciardo put in one of his best ever performances, determined not to let bad luck ruin his chances again. He battled it out with Formula One legend Sebastian Vettel to win the race against all odds. The win was extra satisfying as it came against his former Red Bull teammate. Moving on, never make a bet with Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo seems to get extra motivated anytime the stakes are higher than usual. Back in his days at Renault, Cyril Abiteboul said that he would get a tattoo if Ricciardo was able to get a podium for the team. In hindsight, this was the perfect way for Ricciardo to have left Renault. Sure, there wasn't really a happy ending for either party, but at least Ricciardo got to leave a mark on the team, quite literally. He ended up proving Renault's team principal wrong at the Nürburgring Grand Prix in 2020. Now, it's hard to say whether this was a good good or bad move, but McLaren's Zach Brown decided to make the same wager against Ricciardo. Either this was a stroke of genius and Brown wanted to motivate Daniel, or he made the horrible error of doubting him. Brown had high stakes as well, promising to get inked if the Australian got a top 3 finish. Lo and behold, Daniel Ricciardo delivered. Ricciardo did Brown one better and ended up winning in Monza. He was then recorded saying, "It's a real thing. Zach and Cyril are now stamped for life. It was good because a lot of people, I think, lost faith that it was ever going to happen, but we got there. It was a good time." Those were some great points of Ricciardo's career. So now, let's look at the lows. Coming up, Ricciardo's hometown woes. Being from Australia, Ricciardo's dream was to win big in his own backyard. Unfortunately, he never saw much success down under, with his best ever finish being P6 back in 2015 at Albert Park. It was hard enough not having success in his home country. Ricciardo had to lose out due to disqualification as well. During his first season as a Red Bull driver, Ricciardo was disqualified for exceeding the maximum fuel flow rate of 100 kilograms per hour. The Aussie would have had a front row finish alongside Lewis Hamilton if not for the DQ. We guess your dreams don't always work out as an athlete, but it's definitely sad seeing Ricciardo, now past his prime, knowing that he probably won't get to experience winning on home turf. It doesn't do too much to his legacy as a Formula One veteran, but it is still unfortunate to see. Christian Horner and Red Bull attempted to have the DQ overturned, but despite their best efforts, the decision remained the same. Up next, a cheeky wave from Norris. In his first season with McLaren, Daniel Ricciardo was 33 years old, and it was expected that he'd come in as a senior mentor. Being the seasoned driver that he is, Ricciardo was supposed to be the better driver that Lando Norris would learn from, and in turn grow. However, the complete opposite happened. Lando Norris performed much better throughout the year in an unexpected turn of events. The difference was stark, with Norris finishing higher than Ricciardo in every race they competed in. The difference in performance became clear when the two were competing in Monaco, on a track where Ricciardo had already experienced victory and defeat. This was probably the most embarrassing one. Norris lapped Ricciardo and gave him a cheeky wave as he passed by. The sign was clearly one of disrespect and an unwarranted one as well. It'd be unsurprising if the gesture was taken in offense rather than jest by the Aussie, especially at this stage of his career. In what seems to be his twilight years now, Daniel Ricciardo is a name that should be respected. It's true that his career hasn't gone the way many expected, but watching him during his peak was a pleasure for fans of the sport. Finally, the McLaren axing. As we mentioned briefly before, McLaren decided to terminate Daniel Ricciardo's contract a year before his time with the team was up. To be honest, that's probably the worst way to depart a team. Even if the agreement was reached mutually, it can't feel nice to be deemed surplus to requirements. Ricciardo started off his career with McLaren pretty well, winning in Monza and putting in a few decent performances. His form dwindled though, and he ended up stagnating in a way that spelled the end of his time as a top driver. Rumors started floating about McLaren's decisions regarding Ricciardo's team involvement. Soon after, people were hardly surprised when McLaren decided to part ways with the Australian with a year left on his contract. It was an ugly way for him to go, but at least he's going to enjoy a very lucrative year because of it. That's it for this video, guys. What do you think of Daniel Ricciardo's $36 million paycheck this year? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Remember to subscribe and turn on your post notifications to keep up with videos just like this.